Now it's time for our main talk, y'all, and Mike's main talk today is called The Wisdom of Age, Life Lessons from Seniors. You're not yet totally qualified for that, Mike, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Director of Houston Oasis and the Co-President of the Oasis Network, Mr. Mike House.
Okay. When you're a pastor, which I used to be, you get to spend a lot of time with older people, sometimes with really, really old people. And I used to go around, in most churches you have this thing where, you know, pastors have to go visit, we used to call them the shut-ins, I don't think that's appropriate, I guess. Homebound people, or something, you know, people in nursing homes, homebound people, and the tradition I was in, you would take them Holy Communion like once a month, but really, the communion was kind of an afterthought. It wasn't about religion. It was really just about having a good conversation and checking up on people you cared about, visiting with them. And sometimes we get so engrossed in conversation, we like forget to do communion, which anyway didn't seem to hurt anything. But people sometimes ask me if sometimes people say, do you feel like all your years of ministry were a waste? And I'm like, well, not really. I mean, yeah, all the dogmas and the theology and all that we know there's nothing substantial behind it, but when you spend years working with people, you learn a lot about people, and that's worth something. And as I've been reflecting on those years, because it's been a few years since I've done any of that stuff, the thing I find my mind going back to again and again is the time with the older people. And really cherishing those memories and thinking about the conversations we had. And I realized I learned so much from them. And so today, I just want to share a little bit of that with you. It's kind of a brain dump of stuff I've been thinking, in my own head. So I'm just sharing some ideas with friends about kind of wisdom for life that I learned. Now, none of this is scientific. This is all anecdotal, all based on personal experience, but having talked to hundreds and hundreds of older people over a long time, I feel like I have a pretty good sample size. And I did see some consistent themes emerging. And so I'm going to share some things, and then I'm going to invite you to share some things you may have learned from the elders and the mentors in your life. So here's just a few of the consistent themes that emerged in my years, almost 2 decades, really 2 decades of spending a lot of time with older people. Now, in general, older people tend to be more comfortable in their own skin. They seem to be more at ease with life, more down to earth. They spend less time worrying what other people think about them. Many of them have been through just about everything life can throw at them, and they're still here, and they're surviving, and they're smiling, still plugging away. More than a few times I visit someone in the hospital after a surgery and, just checking up, how are you doing? And I ask them how things went. And before I knew it, they'd be saying something like, well, hey, take a look at the scar. And they'd pull up their hospital gown and, nice, thanks for sharing. But, modesty, look at this. It's like a battle wound, And, can you hand me my teeth? They're in a glass over there. I've done that a few times. I used to visit Nell and Andy. And a lot of times when I tell stories from life, I will change names to kind of protect the innocent. But today I'm using real names because all these people are long gone. But they deserve to be remembered, I think, as I hope we all would like to be remembered. And so I used to visit Nell and Andy. They met in Corpus Christi during the Second World War. Andy was a young serviceman in his 20s from North Dakota, had never left the farm in North Dakota, and now he was stationed in Corpus Christi. Nell was a divorcee in her 40s. And they fell in love and they got married. Now, when I knew them, Nell was 95 and Andy was like 78. And when I would mention to people in town that I was going to visit Nell and Andy, they would still give me this look and like a wink, like, oh, Nell, the temptress, the cradle robber. they couldn't live that down, like, you're visiting the dirty old couple, and they were still like the naughty couple in town. Nell and Annie didn't care. They enjoyed their life together for many decades. Anyway, Nell was a hoot, and I can imagine she was even more of a hoot in the 1940s, because she was a hoot then at 95. When I knew her, she basically spent every day sitting in her chair in the living room, chain-smoking Winstons, I kid you not, all day. Her mind was pretty sharp, but there was something I remember Nell saying every time, in almost every conversation I ever had with her. And she would say this, say, "Where did it all go?" I'd say, "What, Nell? Where did what go?" She said, "Life. Life itself. Where did all the years go?" She would say, "It just went by so quickly." She said that every time. Someone who's 95. And that wasn't just Nell. Many, many others said the same thing. I've never met anybody in their 90s who ever said, "Well, it was a real drag getting here." Everybody. I think it's like almost this universal human experience of, you just feel the rush of time increasing as the years pass. It doesn't matter how long you live. And so I think that's a reminder from older folks that we need to hear and take heart. That life is short, and it does go by fast, and we have to savor every minute of it. And because older people often have that acute sense of time's passage and life's brevity, they do often seem to have this ability to kind of savor the simple pleasures of life in almost this Zen-like way, if you know what I mean. They've learned to their bodies might be betraying them. They might have, all kinds of other struggles in life, but it seems to kind of focus their energies on really appreciating the simple, everyday pleasures of life. I was visiting one woman to bring her greetings on her, I remember this, her 83rd birthday, and when I got to her house, she was sitting in the driveway on a lawn chair in front of her house, enjoying a beautiful day. And I went up and said hi and happy birthday, and got to talking. I said, "Well, what do you attribute your long life to, and your long happy life?" She's a happy woman. I kid you not. She reached under her lawn chair and pulled out a bottle of Shiner Bock beer and said, "2 of these every day." And I think she was serious about the 2-bottle limit. I think there's something else I observed consistently. It was part of this Zen-like ability to savor the simple pleasures of life, was savoring pleasure in moderation so that you really enjoyed it. They've learned how to not hit that, point of diminishing returns. 2 bottles of Shiner Bock is about right, The 3rd does not much better. I know another woman, same kind of thing, where her pleasure was, she loved Coca-Cola in a glass bottle. It had to be in a glass bottle. It was the smaller, there's like 8-ounce bottles, like the small size, something in that, not a 12-ounce can. And she had we'll pull out of the refrigerator, because it had to be chilled, a fresh glass Coke bottle every morning right around 10 o'clock, and she would pour it over ice in a glass, exactly half of it. And then she put a cap on and put it in the fridge. And then she would have the rest of the Coke very same way, kind of mid-afternoon. She loved Coca-Cola. But she had about 4 ounces in the morning, 4 ounces in the afternoon. It always struck me, like, that is the way to enjoy something. That's not usually the way I enjoy stuff. So it's, another thing, keep moving. The happiest, healthiest, oldest people I've known never stopped moving. And I'm not talking about running marathons or going to the gym, but they would cut the grass, they would work in the garden, pull weeds in the garden, they would tend their flowers, they would feed the birds, they would work on all kinds of little projects. They have reasons to get up in the morning, and they have to-do lists. And as they slowed down with age, they would adjust, but they wouldn't stop moving. The minute you stop moving, you're done. I called my aunt a few weeks ago to wish her happy birthday, middle of June. It was her 79th birthday. She had just gotten back from a dive trip in Indonesia. She already has her 80th birthday trip planned. It will be on a scuba dive trip in Palau for her 80th birthday. I want to be like her when I grow up. Keep moving. And finally, the people who age gracefully and I think have invested in friendships. They know how to make and keep friends, and not just friends in their own cohort, but friends across generations. Clark was a guy in one of my churches, one of the gentlest, kindest, humblest people I've ever met. He's one of these people, he was known in town as the person who would do anything for you. And I knew he had some struggles in his life. He had been through a few marriages. He had a bout with alcoholism and some other things, but he was hanging in there, and he was just one of those kind, gentle souls that makes life so much better for others. And we were sitting at his kitchen table one day, having coffee together, and out of the blue, he said, "Mike, do you know what I did in the war?" And I said, "No, Clark, you never told me." I knew he had been in the island hopping operations in the South Pacific during the Second World War. And he looked at me and said, I had to operate the flamethrower. So when the Japanese were hiding out in the caves and they wouldn't come out, they would send me in to torch them. And the Japanese soldiers would come running out in flames, screaming. And I still have nightmares about that all these years later. And I had another one of those nightmares last night. Over 50 years after the end of the Second World War. We ask so much of people who go into combat, so much. This is a digression from Clark. I'm going to go back to him in a second, but back after 9/11, when so many people in this country, including so many people in the media, were so rah-rah about going in to invade Iraq, and almost universally, it was the older veterans that I knew who were opposed to it. One guy came up to me one day, and I knew that he was career military retired. He had seen combat in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. And he came up to me with tears in his eyes, wearing his American Legion cap, said, "We should not be doing this." Next time we think about going to war, maybe we should just take a poll of our older veterans and let them decide, rather than politicians who have never been to war. Getting back to Clark, Clark had a friend across town who actually lived on the same street as me. His name was Grady. Grady was a widower, and kind of just like Clark, he was a kind, gentle spirit. He was the town's retired pharmacist. His wife had passed away a couple years earlier, and his passion, his great passion in life, was roses. He had a magnificent rose garden, and he grew roses of all different varieties, and he loved to tell you about his roses and what they were, and just, they were amazing. And that was one of his reasons for getting up in the morning. Well, anyway, Grady needed hip replacement surgery, and so he had his hip replacement surgery. It went pretty well, but you know, went to the hospital, did a little rehab, went home, but still, it's a big thing to recover from, and he was living by himself. And for the first, few weeks, I guess, after he got back, he needed help using the restroom in the middle of the night, and he lived by himself. And so Clark, during those days, would get up. He'd call Clark if he needed help. Clark said, "If you need me, call me anytime." So he would call Clark at 2 or 3. And I know Grady's the kind of guy who would never want to impose on anybody for any reason, but, sometimes just... And so when he reached the point where he needed help, he would call Clark at 2 or 3 in the morning. Clark would get in his car, drive across town, and help his friend with the bedpan, because that's what friends do. And, when all is said and done, that is what life boils down to. And I think it's something older people tend to know much better than many of us do, but, all this stuff that busies our minds and worries us and stresses us out someday, gang, it's all gonna boil down to, do you have a friend or a couple good friends who are gonna come and help you, or you can go help them, use the bedpan or whatever it is they need in the middle of the night when there's no one else there to help. And if you have those friends, you will be a very, very lucky person. I sometimes said that I got involved with starting Oasis because I wanted someone to visit me in the nursing home. And that is actually not entirely an exaggeration. When I'm older and retired, I want a place where I can sit and drink coffee with people like you and play dominoes or discuss the world's problems or dispense wisdom to the youth group. And I'm sure as heck not going to do it in the fellowship hall of First Baptist Church, which is the default gathering place of senior citizens in every town across Texas. Well, it depends upon the town. Sometimes it's First Baptist, sometimes it's First Methodist. But in every town across Texas, from El Campo to Wharton to you name it, there is a church where the town's senior citizens gather for mutual support and friendship and dominoes and coffee and everything else. I ain't going there because I want to be with you guys. And so basically we have to start working on this now, folks. Churches are gradually going away. That is a given. We know it's actually not so gradual. And our culture we still need each other. We still need communities where people care about each other. And the other thing about this is that we have people of all ages need each other. Old people need young people need old people, middle-agers need both people. We all need friends of all ages. Older people need younger people because sometimes all your friends die. I've seen that happen too. If all your friends are only old people, someone is always the last man standing, okay? And that can be a very lonely place to be. So you need younger friends too. So nobody is without a friend because we don't have to be alone. We are making that happen here. Here's a quote that was floating around on on Facebook, which I posted on my page today because I loved it. It's one of the best quotes I've heard in a long time. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Together, we're building that model. And I hope we are all in this together for the long haul. And I think we are, and I think we're building something beautiful that's going to touch people across the country and across the generations. So keep up the good work, and thanks for letting me be a part of this with you, and come visit me in the nursing home. We normally have kind of a Q&A time, but instead of questions today, I'm sorry, that quote that I shared with you comes from the architect and inventor Buckminster Fuller, and it's on my Facebook page if you want to see it. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So what I'd like to do today is invite you, if you have stories like that, okay, don't make it long, okay? Don't give us a community moment. But I would like to hear what wisdom you've possibly gained from people in your lives. Grandparents, great-grandparents, mentors, anything. Or did I hit every... no, there's got to be stories. There's got to be something to share. If you don't, we can do it later. Yeah. You have to think. Well, think for a minute.
I have a short story. My oldest son is an attorney, and when he was going to law school, he had internships with several different firms. But he talked to me, he said, "I need some advice, Dad." I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, I'm between, in the summer before my last year of law school, and so I've been getting some very prestigious offers for internship, but I have another offer that doesn't pay very well, and that's I could be a ranger at the Philmont Scout Camp." And he said, "And they give me $30 a month plus food." He said, "What do you think I ought to do?" And I said, "Hey, you can be a lawyer anytime. You know, grab it when you got it." And that's my story.
grab it when you got it. I like that. That's good. Fred has one. Oh, and there's someone over there. FCD.
I don't know if this is advice, but I'd like to tell you all of the last time I saw my mother alive, what she told me. And it was profound, and it's a blessed memory, and I don't use that word often. I was about to leave, come back to Houston. She was up in the Panhandle. I said, Mom, you know, we've made arrangements for the funeral home, this, that, and the other. She'd already said she wanted to go. And I said, but we haven't talked about the graveside service. She didn't want a church service, but she wanted to be, but we were going to have a graveside service. I said, is there anything that you would like done or sung or talked about at the graveside service? And she looked at me in an odd way and she said, suit yourself, my dear. I don't plan to attend.
One thing I've learned, when you get in a disagreement and in the process of that disagreement, if you know you're right and you have factual, verifiable information that would prove you're right, if in that disagreement you've offended them, always apologize at a later date for the fact that you offended them.
Thank you. See, this is morphing into a different. This is great because my original thought was people would share wisdom that they had received, but now we have our elders sharing wisdom with us, which I appreciate. That's really nice.
I guess one of the cool things when you do get older and you come to terms with the fact that your time is limited, I think some people accept that more easily, you know, the longer they're around. But my mother was ill and she was ready to go. And the doctor came in to give her the bad news about her diagnosis, and she just looked up at him, and it was so peacefully, and she said, who cares? Let's go ride the ponies. And that's what she used to say when she was a kid, when she wanted to blow off whatever it was. Some adult was trying to impress upon her or make her, you know, she just said, you know what? It's over. Who cares? She knew then, even then, that it wasn't that important, you know, dying.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And kind of piggybacking off of TC, you know, one of the things is I think beyond just getting older, it's also just the finitude of life. And for those who know someone, family member that maybe didn't live to be older but is going through perhaps a terminal illness. And unfortunately, that's the situation with my father. About 1.5 years ago, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And so we're kind of entering the last months of his life, unfortunately. And even though he's 61, he's not going to get, you know, be 80 or 90 and live into his older years. The amount of wisdom that I've been able to get from him in this time, and the things that really matter, come out. And even for myself, it's kind of a morbid practice, perhaps, but a good secular practice, I think, is to meditate on our own death. And to think about that, and then in that light, think about what's really important. And I think we can generate our own wisdom that way. So.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. That's great. That's amazing. Yeah, we can do one more, I guess.
A lot of people think you say don't be serious or be serious or so forth. Their definition of serious is considerably different than yours or somebody else's. And I've got a saying, don't take life too serious. Nobody ever gets out alive anyway. And people look at me when I say that, and I can read in their face what they consider is serious. And a lot of people's definitions of serious is totally nothing or not important, really. They get serious about things that 2 days later they won't even remember what it was.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I've been around, well, I'll be 82 this year, so I'm not 19 anymore. But I still don't think you should take life too serious because you're not going to get out of it alive.
Thank you. And then speaking of this kind of wisdom from the elders, I did receive some from one of our elders we had a wonderful karaoke night on Friday night if you didn't make it, you have to come to the next one because it gets keep getting better and better. And you do not have to sing. But Fred Thompson was at karaoke and he observed that, do you know why freethinkers cannot sing R&B? I said, no. Why, Fred? He said, because they don't have any soul. Thank you, Fred. Thanks for sharing that stuff, guys, and thanks for letting me talk to you. And
Very, very